In the heart of the bustling city of Portland, there was a little neighborhood known as Hawthorne Grove. Its streets were lined with small, colorful houses, and there was a park in the middle where children played and neighbors gathered. But among all the people who lived there, none was as well known or as loved as a scruffy brown dog named Rusty. Rusty wasn't a purebred or a show dog. In fact, no one was quite sure what kind of mix he was. His fur was a patchwork of browns and whites, his ears stood up unevenly, and his tail wagged like it had a mind of its own. But Rusty had something far more special than pedigree. He had a heart that made everyone around him feel like they were his best friend. Rusty had belonged to Mrs. Agnes Thornton, the oldest resident in Hawthorne Grove. She had adopted him from the local shelter when he was just a pup. From the moment Rusty set his paws in her home, they were inseparable. Mrs. Thornton took Rusty everywhere, on walks through the park, to the grocery store, even to the town bakery, where he became a fixture, waiting patiently outside for a biscuit from the baker. But one winter, Mrs. Thornton grew ill. The doctors said it was serious, and soon she wasn't able to take Rusty on their daily walks anymore. Neighbors would sometimes come by to help, bringing groceries and checking in on her, but Rusty stayed by her side, watching over her with his big brown eyes. When she passed away quietly one night, the whole neighborhood mourned. Without Mrs. Thornton, Rusty didn't have a home. But he didn't leave. Every day, he would trot down the same path he and Mrs. Thornton used to walk. He'd stop by the bakery, wait for his biscuit, and then make his rounds through the park. It was like he was still following the old routine they had shared, as if in his mind, she was still walking beside him. At first, people worried about Rusty. He was, after all, a stray now, living on his own. But something amazing happened. Hawthorne Grove came together to take care of him. No one officially adopted Rusty, but everyone did, in their own way. The bakery left out extra biscuits for him. The kids in the neighborhood brought him toys and treats. Neighbors took turns making sure he had water and a warm place to sleep during the colder months. Rusty, in turn, became the guardian of the neighborhood. He trot up to greet new families moving in, welcoming them with a wag of his tail. If a child fell in the park, Rusty was there, offering a lick to the face to cheer them up. If an elderly neighbor was walking alone, Rusty would follow alongside them, as if making sure they were safe. One summer, there was a particularly big event in Hawthorne Grove, the annual block party. It was a tradition that had been around for years, where the whole neighborhood would gather for games, food, and fun. This year, the planning committee decided to do something special for Rusty. They held a contest to officially name him the mayor of Hawthorne Grove. It was all in good fun, of course, but when the votes were counted, Rusty won by a landslide. The neighborhood kids made him a tiny sash out of red fabric, which he wore proudly as he wandered through the block party, accepting belly rubs and treats from everyone he passed. But that summer also brought something unexpected. A developer had set his sights on Hawthorne Grove. He planned to buy up the little houses and build new, bigger homes, ones that many of the current residents wouldn't be able to afford. The neighbors were worried. They didn't want their close-knit community to be torn apart, but they weren't sure how to stop it. One evening, as the neighborhood gathered to discuss what they could do, Rusty sat quietly among them, as if sensing the tension in the air. He wasn't just a dog to them, he was a symbol of everything Hawthorne Grove stood for. Togetherness. Loyalty. Family. And then, as if on cue, Rusty stood up and began to walk, making his way down the street. The neighbors watched, curious, as he led them past the bakery, past the park, past all the homes they knew so well. He stopped in front of Mrs. Thornton's old house and sat down, looking up at the front door. It was like Rusty was reminding them of what they were fighting for. The sense of home, the community they had built, the memories tied to every corner of the neighborhood. Inspired by Rusty's silent message, the neighbors rallied. They held meetings, gathered signatures, and even started a campaign to preserve Hawthorne Grove as a historical neighborhood. It wasn't easy, but their determination paid off. The developers' plans were put on hold, and the town council voted to protect the neighborhood. Hawthorne Grove would stay as it was, a place where families grew, memories were made, and a scruffy dog named Rusty could roam freely, knowing he was loved by everyone. As the years passed, Rusty grew older, his once spry steps slowing down. But no matter his age, he still made his rounds every day, still greeted new faces, and still had that same wag of the tail that made everyone feel special. When Rusty finally passed away, the whole neighborhood came together again, just as they had when they first lost Mrs. Thornton. They held a small memorial in the park, where Rusty had spent so many of his days. And in the center of the park, they placed a small statue, a bronze figure of Rusty, sitting proudly with his head held high, looking out over the town he had watched over for so long. The plaque beneath the statue read, "In memory of Rusty, the heart of Hawthorne Grove." And though Rusty was gone, his spirit lived on in every street, every house, and every person who called Hawthorne Grove home.